so I like to thank to them for hosting the event and co-sponsoring this event. So we can, so other than that, all I need to say, which is not very short, is to introduce today's speaker, Winston. He's from Indiana University. He's a professor of operations and decision technologies. He has been there since 1975. Sorry, I'm dating you.
That's okay.
He's a Eli Lilly faculty fellow, and he has a master's in math from MIT and PhD from Yale University in operations research. I actually have some personal connection with him that he did not know. When I was studying operational research in my sophomore year, I studied from his book. So I feel that I knew him for 20 years, but he just met me today. But besides that, he has many books. Today, actually, I looked at Amazon.com to see how many books appear under his name. I saw 57 items.
There's not that many. It's like 500.
Some are different editions of the same book, but he's a very prolific author, and I always enjoy reading his books. Besides writing books, he is involved in projects with companies such as Eli Lilly, Bristol Myers, Microsoft, Intel, Cisco, and the Department of Defense. But today's talk is related to sports, and he's doing consulting work with Mavericks.
They didn't hire us this year, I have to say.
He was doing, I really want to say he was doing consulting.
I'll probably see him on Saturday. I'll be at the game Saturday for an alumni reception.
And he confirmed that Mark Cuban was his student, so I guess that's why the connection was coming. And as a city, I think in Dallas, we like our sports, be it Mavericks or Dallas Cowboys. And in 2 weeks, there will be an all-star game here, an NBA game. So I think the talk is very timely in that perspective. And without further ado, I leave you with Winston.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me here. This is what the book looks like. I think the title is quite good. I didn't think of it, somebody else did. Mathletics, math and sports. And I think, given your interest in, obviously, math, and I'm sure you wouldn't be here if you weren't interested in sports, I think you'll find it quite interesting. But I'm going to try. How long should I speak? An hour? Is that okay?
That's good.
Okay. I mean, we'll try an hour. I think I have enough stuff. But I want to give you a tutorial on how math is used in sports. And so what we want to do is talk about how can math make teams perform better. Now, sorry, I'm not going to talk much about soccer. I'm not going to talk much about hockey. I think there's a lot that could be done there. But basically, it's going to be baseball, basketball, and football. And since this is Texas, we probably care about football the most. My favorite TV show is Friday Night Lights. Anybody watch Friday Night Lights? Everybody should watch it. You get the first season DVD. And I'm driving to Austin tomorrow to see somebody there. So hopefully I'll run into some of the people from Friday Night Lights in Austin. I want to get a Friday Night Lights t-shirt or something. Okay, but how does math make teams play better? And so, really what we're talking about mainly tonight, how do you tell if one player is better than another? Now I listen to ESPN radio every day for hours and hear people talk about this. And sometimes I think they know what they're doing and sometimes I don't. And if they had me on, I'm sure they would think I'm an idiot a lot of the time. I got in trouble for saying Kevin Durant was not a good player his first 2 years in the NBA. And I think I can convince you that that's true, and he's a really good player now. I mean, but I stand by the fact he was not a good player his first 2 years in the NBA. I can prove that to you. I think we have time. An important thing, in the paper, a lot of you are much younger, almost all of you are much younger than I am, but a lot of us grew up with the box scores in baseball, football, and basketball, and that's what we looked at. But I think a lot of what measures how good a player is not in the box score. And the sport where I think the most work needs to be done is, surprisingly, I think football. Everybody thinks football is a high-tech sport and we know everything about it, but I think in football, baseball, I think I can show you how to be a general manager of a baseball team in 10 minutes. And use what you've learned in OR. There are a lot of optimization problems. Key optimization problem in running a sports team is the salary cap. Or how do I allocate the money to maximize wins? And I mean, I don't think anybody's built the right optimization model for that at all. I mean, just where to start on that? I mean, there's so much unseen work that needs to be done in math and sports. And then how to use basic decision theory to make better in-game decisions. And the most obvious example of this, how many people saw the Colts-Patriots game, 4th and 2 on the 28-yard line, Belichick went for it. Now, okay, so the situation was 4th and 2 on the 28-yard line. The Patriots are ahead by 6 points with 2 minutes to go. This is their own 28-yard line. He did not punt the ball, okay? And the announcers thought this was a mistake, and uniformly, the 5 announcers in the game afterwards said, this is the worst coaching decision in the history of sports. Now, how many people think he made a bad decision who saw that game? I mean, it's fine if you did. I'm not saying he made a good or bad decision, but I'm saying it's an easy math problem to determine if that's a good or bad decision. And it really is a good sort of example of how the students here should approach, and the practicing OR people should approach problems. I mean, it's really very similar to problems we face in the real world. And a lot of things we talk about here, you'll see how these apply beyond sports. So even if you don't care that much about sports, which I know we all care about sports, but even if we don't, you'll see lessons to this you can use in your non-sports work. Well, why start with baseball? Because that's where this stuff was done first. How many people read a book called Moneyball? And supposedly they're making a movie with Brad Pitt playing the general manager. I think they pulled the plug on that movie because but then they were going to start it back up again. I don't know. Brad Pitt. I mean, it was okay in Benjamin Button, but I don't know what that movie. But even if you don't like sports, you should read Moneyball. Moneyball is a fantastic book. It's basically about how the Oakland A's spend $50 million a year. The Yankees. How many Yankee fans here? Oh, we have one or two. Okay. Okay. Because usually outside of New York, are you from New York?
I spent 7 years there.
Okay. Because almost nobody is a Yankee fan who's not, has nothing to do with New York. I mean, most people are Yankee haters. But the Yankees used to spend $200 million a year. They probably still do on players. And the Oakland A's spent $50 million. And the Oakland A's would win as many games. So how did they do that? They understood better how to buy players who are good at a cheap price. And really, does anybody know who started this event? No, I know what you're going to say, but it's not quite the right answer. I have chocolate here to get questions right. Who started the math analysis of baseball?
Bill James.
Okay, that's what most people say, but there was a guy before him. Bill James is great. We'll talk about him. He was a night watchman in Lawrence, Kansas. There's a great 60 Minutes. If you go on 60 Minutes archives, pull up the 20-minute segment on Bill James. It's very well done. And the Red Sox won the World Series in 2004 over the Yankees because they used math. The Yankees are finally catching on. And we'll talk about the Yankees in a couple of minutes here. But does anybody know the guy who really started the math analysis of baseball? He was an OR guy. George Lindsay. There's an article in the Operations Research Journal. I don't have the exact date. It's in my book somewhere. But he went through thousands of box scores of baseball games, and he would find out things like you shouldn't bunt. Okay? And the Oakland A's almost never bunt. There's some more debate on that now, that maybe bunting is sort of getting a revival, just like the Republicans, I guess, after last week. I don't know. But let's talk about issues in baseball. First question, how to tell if one hitter is better than another? Let's look at an example. Ichiro, I think, hit 360 last year. He doesn't hit anything but singles, basically. Cecil Fielder for the Brewers hit about 300, but hit about 40 home runs.
Prince Fielder.
Cecil Fielder.
Prince.
Oh, Prince Fielder. Oh, Cecil's his father. That's how old I am. Sorry about that. I got to change that slide. Okay. Okay, you can tell how old I am. I do not remember Cecil. Yeah, he was a vegetarian, then became a non-vegetarian, whatever. So who was a better player? Well, how do you look at this? Well, there's lots of ways. Bill James came up with this thing called runs created. We can't, and all this stuff's in the book, but we just want to give you sort of a roadmap. Basically, how many runs was each of these guys responsible for in his times at bat? But see, that's a really nebulous, that's a really hard question to define. Because what it really means is who else was on the team? I mean, so what a lot of people look at is if I had a team of 9 Prince Fielders or a team of 9 Ichiros, how many runs would they score? And there's 2 ways to do this. So how would you try and figure, I mean, what statistics do you don't have a team of 9 Ichiros, right? There's no such thing. How would you figure out how many runs such a team would score? Well, there's a couple of ways you can think about it. What do you know about a baseball player? You know his singles, doubles, triples, homers, his walks, his strikeouts. You know that stuff. So can you find a way to relate those, what technique would you guys use that you've learned somewhere to try and relate singles, doubles, triples, homers, walks, whatever, to run score? What could you use that you've learned somewhere in school for the students? Regression. See, what data do we have? We can go back, and the beautiful thing about sports is all this stuff's on the web. You can go back every year, look at every team, how many runs they scored, how many singles, doubles, triple homers, and walks they had, and all that stuff. You can run a regression, it's in the book, predict number of runs scored by a team based on those things. You get the relative importance of singles, doubles, triples, and homers. A double is obviously more important than a single. A homer is more important than a double, but a homer is 4 times more important than a single. So you can run that regression, sorry, and you can figure out basically how many runs a team should score if you knew what the team did. Well, that doesn't quite tell you, so you could say if I have a team of 9 Ichiros, put in 9 times Ichiro statistics, sort of figure out how many runs that team would score. Now, let's go back to one of our non-favorites now, Barry Bonds, okay? I mean, we're not big fans of Barry Bonds, but was it 2004, I'm not sure the year, when he basically went off the charts in being like creating runs. I mean, if you work out sort of by that method how many runs Barry Bonds would create, you get like over 20 runs, 9 Barry Bonds. And that's probably okay. But let me ask you another question here for, again, well, everybody in the room. I told you how we get these linear weights. In other words, maybe a home run is worth 3 times as much as a single. I don't quite remember the weights, but it's in the book. That's not the point. If I use that regression to try and predict how many runs a team of 9 Barry Bonds would score, what mistake am I making that we often make in the real world? See, there's no team in history of baseball like 9 Barry Bonds, right? I mean, he hit the 70 home runs that year. We're extrapolating a regression beyond the range for which we have that. See, the regression, the independent variable was runs scored by the team, right? The singles, doubles, triples, home runs were generated by a team. There was no team that walked like 200 times per 600 at bats and hit 70 home runs. There's no such team. So you have to learn when you guys have all studied regression, I am sure, right? You guys at SMU and UT Dallas and all the people working. You've used regression. Don't ever use a regression to predict beyond the range where you have data. So there is no way you can use a regression to get the weights for like a team of 9 Barry Bonds. So what can we turn to another OR tool? Simulation. You can build a simulation model, and I have one of these, we just don't have time, and again, all this stuff's in the book. I use at-risk, a Monte Carlo tool. Some of you, how many people have used at-risk or Crystal Ball? Okay, fair number of people. These are great tools. But I can build a spreadsheet that has 9, I think Albert Pujols is probably the best player in baseball right now, hitter in baseball right now. I made the thing play out like I say, if a guy has a 30% chance of a single, I draw a random number. If it's 0 to 0.3, he gets a single. And I just play out 9 Albert Pujols. I can also play out Albert Pujols added to an average team. Okay. And so I can see how much a guy adds to an average team, which is probably a better measure than basically the 9 Albert Pujols, because there's no team of 9 Albert Pujols. And so basically simulate and see, that's where really the right way to do this, and I didn't do it in the book because the math is a little hard, it's a Markov chain. Because baseball is if you know what a Markov chain is, your next state depends on where you are now. So like, what are the states in baseball in an inning? Man on first, none out, man on first, one out. There's 24 states. Like, at the beginning, nobody's on base. I walk, there's a man on first, nobody out. Okay. And, oh, by the way, I should have said the linear weight simplifies in the Moneyball book. I don't know how many of you collect baseball cards, but what's the new statistic on baseball cards that when, let's say 20 years ago, was not on a baseball card? Anybody know?
OPS.
OPS, right. I'll give you a piece of chocolate like that. OPS, which is what? Tell me what it is.
On base percentage
plus slugging percentage. It's a great surrogate for linear weights. On base percentage plus slugging percentage sort of mimics the regression. You get an R squared of 94% predicting team runs from the linear weights, but when you predict with on base plus slugging percentage, because anybody can do that in their head. Ichiro hit 360, maybe his slugging was 500, so he's an 860. Cesar Prince Fielder probably has a 700 slugging, 300, he's 1,000. So Prince Fielder is actually the better player. But there's a better way to do this, I think, than runs created. And I'm so happy to see this Fangraphs site, which I'm going to show. How many people have ever looked at Fangraphs.com? Well, if you like baseball, and I mean, baseball seems to be the least popular word of the three now, and I know actually, I've learned a lot about it writing the book, and I know by far, I think I know more about basketball. And I'll brag, I think I know more about the math of basketball than anybody else, because we've been doing it longer. And other people are trying to do what we do now, and I think they're doing a good job, but we'll get to basketball in a couple of seconds here. Okay, a couple of minutes. Okay, so how to evaluate, so ops on baseball slugging percentage does a pretty good job, and that's on the baseball cards now. I think after the Moneyball book, they started putting that on. So if you take a guy's on-base percentage, which is walks plus hits basically, and his slugging percentage, which means give 4 credits for a home run, 3 for a triple. That's not a bad way to evaluate hitters. Okay, how to evaluate pitchers. This, if you read the Moneyball book, this was the most amazing thing. What's it? We mentioned simulation, we mentioned work-off chains, we mentioned regression. All important things in operations research. Forecasting is a very important thing in operations research. Bad forecasting is why we're in this financial mess. The model said housing prices could never go down. Guess what? They went down. Okay, I could give you a whole hour seminar on what caused the financial. 2 words: misaligned incentives, bad models. 4 words. That is the financial crisis. That's what caused the mess we're in. And just hopefully, particularly for the young people in the class, I just hope it ends within a year or 2, because it's really quite sad for everybody. Well, it's not quite bad down here. Okay, but evaluating pitchers. So what's the main statistic we use for pitchers if they're a starting pitcher? Earned run average. How many runs you give up per 9 innings. Relief pitcher saves. Now a save, I don't want to go technical definition, but a save is a joke. I mean, every save is a different situation. But here's the amazing thing. I always thought earned run average is what you look at. Well, the reason it's bad, there are several reasons why it's bad. Because good fielders will lower your earned run average if you've got a great defense. And we will show you in a few minutes, Tampa Bay won the American League in 2008, upsetting the Red Sox and Yankees, and nobody thought that was possible. Now, they were run by 2 guys who used to work for Bear Stearns. That sounds like there's no way they should have been any good, okay, with what happened to Bear Stearns. But how did Tampa Bay win the 2008 American League? By understanding the importance of defense, fielding. They went out and improved their team by 16 games, and I can show you that in a couple of minutes. Okay, but ERA, what this guy, if you want to get a job in sports statistics, I get this question all the time. There's only one way you have a shot at it. First, there's not that many teams, it's hard to get it. You have to develop something that nobody else has done. You have to do a data analysis, come up with an important conclusion in a team sport that shows something nobody else has done. Okay, and I'll give you an example. Boros McCracken, he figured out you can't predict next year's ERA from last year's ERA. You think to predict next year's statistic, you use last year's, or the last few years. It doesn't work. I mean, and the reason it doesn't work is there's a lot of randomness in being a pitcher. The randomness is a lot of the balls hit in play, it's just luck whether the fielder catches them or not. So what they do now, what they look at is defense-independent pitching statistics. They only use your walks, your home runs, and strikeouts, and you have a metric based on that, and that predicts ERA better next year than last year's ERA. There's so, I mean, like Greg Maddux, 1 year, maybe 50% of the balls hit in play would be caught by fielders, the next year 70%. It's just luck, for the most part. It's not the fielding. For knuckleball pitchers, it's fairly consistent. Again, the book goes through an analysis of all this stuff. So they're really, see, what do I want to know if I'm a general manager? If you can do this better than the people out there, you got yourself a job. Look at all the past data on every baseball, basketball, football player. Predict the next 2 years. If you can do that better than the people out there and show you've got an algorithm, the data's there, you can prove you're good, you'll get hired by somebody. And you'll also be a better forecaster in whatever other stuff you do in life. Because, I mean, you can look up, there's a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheet, with every baseball player's record by season. So you can validate that you have a good method. You got to put age in there. There's a whole bunch of things you need to put in there. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that needs to be done. But the nice thing is, okay, so suppose you could evaluate pitchers. Well, then I ask you this question. What's more important, a good starting pitcher or a good hitter? It doesn't help you. If I know Santana or Sabathia is a great starting pitcher, and I know Prince Fielder is a great hitter, who's more valuable to the team? There's an easy way to do that. And now, if you follow the Cy Young voting this year, what's the guy's name in the Giants? Winston, and who won in the American League? I can't remember. Holland.
No,
it wasn't
Frankie.
Yeah, Frankie on Kansas City. And if you look at the people who voted, they looked at something called win probability added, and that's really the key That's really the key to analyzing baseball players. We have to talk about fielding. But then I can show you the website, and I can show you how easy it is. Like I'm a Cubs fan. That's sort of a dumb thing to be. Okay. And first interview I got about this book was by the Chicago NPR station, and he spent the half hour saying, "Another season ending at Wrigley Field. What can we do better next year?" And the Cubs are one of the few baseball teams that doesn't have a statistician. Mark Cuban wanted to buy the Cubs, but that didn't pan out. I think he still might buy the Pirates someday because he's from Pittsburgh. Okay, but I think his wife would divorce him if he had another keys. Okay, so there's one last thing. See, why is baseball the easiest game to analyze? It's really a pitcher-hitter game. Football and basketball are not pitcher. You can't, it's a team game. The only difference is the fielding. So how to evaluate fielders, and this is like one of my, if I had to give a talk to a group of business people, I would talk about fielding. Why? You guys who work, you have metrics at your company, right? Now, are they good metrics or bad metrics? I won't ask you to comment. But a bad metric is worse than no metric at all. Just like a bad model is worse than no. So how did they used to evaluate? Derek Jeter, who I love, and he's going to marry Lila for Friday Night Lights, which shows he has very good taste. Okay, but be honest about that. November 5th is the wedding date, 2 days after the World Series. Okay. And I love Derek Jeter, and he's a great hitter, but in the past he's been a lousy fielder. Yet he's won 3 or 4 Gold Gloves. I mean, he's won Gold Gloves, which means they think he's the best fielder. So how did they used to evaluate fielders? Fielding percentage, like a 90-80 fielding percentage, means 98% of the balls that you sort of get near, you successfully field. And that, for 100 years of baseball, was the way we evaluated fielders. And then enter Bill James. I mean, he's like an Einstein or a Newton, a paradigm. He just looks at things, another thing in your career. Don't look at things the way people teach you to look at them always. Look at them the way you think they should be looked at. So for 110 years, maybe 110 years, fielding percentage is the way we evaluated, let's say, shortstops. And I don't know what the most important position is. It's probably shortstop or second base, or center field. Okay, now what's wrong with fielding percentage? Well, if I just sit there and don't move to the left or right, I'll have a really good fielding percentage because I field the easy balls. But then what happens on all the other balls hit that the shortstops that it got to? They're hits and they mess up the pitcher. So you have to understand that fielding percentage is misleading because the guys who don't move, have no range, have the good fielding percentage. So Bill James' first step, and he doesn't always get to the right final step, but he pushes everybody in the right direction. How would you, the greatest shortstop of all time is generally considered to be Ozzie Smith of the Cardinals and the Padres. Okay, so fielding percentage, he's nothing special. Okay, so how do you show that Ozzie Smith is a great shortstop? Range factor. Now what is range factor? You look at how many balls the guy gets to. You take putouts plus assists per inning. Divide that by the average for all shortstops. Derek Jeter comes out about 0.9. What does that mean? He gets to 10% less balls than the average shortstop. So he's not that good. Okay, what is the range factor for Ozzie Smith? About 1.3. What does that mean? Ozzie Smith gets to 30% more balls than the average shortstop. He may make more errors, but think about all the hits he saved. So, but you can, that's nice, but it's not perfect. So and they're working on this as we speak. I mean, we'll show you how Tampa Bay basically won the American League in 1 minute. Okay. So what's the next step? You divide the field into zones. What does that mean? Like over second base, 5 feet to the left of second base, 5 feet to the right of second base. And they actually do velocity. There's people who watch the video of every ball hit. So you think about a ball hit right over second base that the shortstop should field. You look at every major league play where a ball was hit like that at that speed. You find out 20% of those were successfully fielded. So if you field that ball, you stopped 1 hit. On average, a guy would have stopped 0.2 hits. You get credit for 0.8 hits stopped. If you don't stop that ball, they would have, on the average, stopped 0.2 of those. You got a 0. You get a minus 0.2 credit. That has an expected value of 0. You sum up over every play involving a fielder those numbers, and you get to how many hits above or below average a guy stopped or caused. And then they've gotten, so they now add on throwing guys out and making double plays. And there's something called ultimate zone rating. So let me show you Fangraphs. Let me show you what Tampa Bay understood fielding was important. Moneyball doesn't hardly mention fielding, I don't think. Tampa Bay understood in 2007 the the value, true value of fielding. I'll give you, okay, here's how you analyze baseball. If you can make your team 10 runs better, you win one more game. 10 runs is one win. And that'll lead us to the next thing in baseball, then we'll get off baseball. Okay, so let me just quickly, I mean, we're talking about baseball, but it's really, from the standpoint of the modeling, it's really the right thing to talk about. Okay. Sports 2010, let's see. Rays fielding, okay. All right, so this is directly downloaded from bandgraphs.com, which I'll show you in a couple of minutes what they've got. And you know what, I mean, basically, all you got ultimate zone rating. Remember I said a plus 10 means you're 10 runs better than average, which means you're worth one win. You can translate wins into fielding, into salary too. I don't have time to do all this stuff. Okay, but it's all in the book. But if you add up Tampa Bay in 2007, they're minus 58 their zone ratings. Remember, 10 runs is one win. Their fielding was 6 games worse than average. Okay? So in 2007, what do they go out and do? They buy fielding. I'll show you this in a minute. And basically, fielding was cheap because at this point in time, people didn't really, very few teams understood the value of fielding. Now, look at the Tampa Bay in 2008. The zone rating is 7.74. They went from 5.8 wins worse than average in fielding to 7.4 wins better than average in fielding. That's 13 wins. So they were basically, they improved their fielding by 13 wins. That's like going from winning 80 games to 93. I mean, that's a lot. I mean, and that didn't cost much. I mean, that they went from being like the worst fielding team in baseball to the best fielding team in baseball. And they, too bad Bear Stearns didn't understand the mortgage-backed securities as well as these guys understood. Fielding would be in a better situation. Okay. So, going back to what we had here. Okay. Putting it all together, how you can add the fielding on at the end. Like I'll figure out how good a hitter, pitchers, you don't care about the fielding much. But if I figure out how good a hitter is, then I can figure out how many wins he contributed by the ultimate zone rating. If he's 2 games better than average in fielding, you add 2 games to his hitting rating. So what should you look at? It's so simple. Every time a batter's up, okay, I hit a home run. I increase my chance of the team winning the game, right? I make an out. I decrease my chance of the team winning the game. You can measure what the chance of winning the game is at any point in the game. Now, here's a good question. How do you, like at the beginning you assume it's 50-50. But how do you measure the chance of a team winning the game up 3 runs in the top of the 5th, 2 outs, a man on first? See, there's 2 ways to do it. You can go back to every game in history where a team was up 2 runs with a man on first, 2 outs in the 5th, or whatever. And that works out pretty well. But what's the problem with that method? Suppose we're down by 9 runs in the bottom of the 7th, 2 outs, a man on second. That may have never happened. So what do you think the tool is that we would use to try and figure out these win probabilities at any point in time if there's not enough data points? Simulation. So they built simulation. If I'm down 12 runs in the 7th inning with the bases loaded and 2 outs, that may have never happened in baseball history. But I can build a simulation model that could play that out 1,000,000 times and say, I might win that game 2 out of 1,000,000. But so the best book on basically baseball math is called The Book by a guy named Tango. I think he works for the Mariners now. And the Mariners made a lot of good season moves. I think you probably noticed. And they deserve it. They've got great fans. The Rangers, by the way, are run by a Cornell graduate, I think, industrial management. And basically, most of the baseball teams, they can't get along without a person who understands what we're talking about. But basically, what you can do, you can figure out every time a guy is up, how much does his at bat increase or decrease the chance of the team winning? You can do the same for the pitcher. Like Bobby Thompson's famous home run when they're down 2 runs at the bottom of the 9th, Dodgers-Giants at 51, took their chance of winning the game from 30% to 100%. So that's worth 7.7 wins. And that Fangraphs.com does this stuff. So like if I look at the Yankees, we can decompose now how good the Yankees are in 2009. I don't remember exactly how many games they won, but I can tell you exactly why they won their games. And I can tell you why the Cubs lost their game. What did the Rangers finish last year? I have no idea. 70 and 90, I don't know.
No, we were above 500.
Above 500? Okay. The Angels won't be as good this year, but the Mariners will be better. Okay, but let's take a look at the Yankees, and then we'll get off baseball. It's just not that I don't like it, but we just don't have time. Okay, so what I got off Fangraphs.com. Okay, I just downloaded here. Oh, that's Rivera, yeah. It was just fantastic. Okay, so I have the fielding. How good? So if you look at fielding, hitting, plus pitching should equal the ability of the team. And you look at wins better than average. I told you how to do fielding. So the Yankees were 2 games worse than average on fielding. Minus 19 ultimate zone rating. Okay, let's look at their hitting. God, do they have good hitting. But they let Johnny Damon go. I mean, you can put it in project next season here. Okay, WPA is not the Works Public Administration of the New Deal. It's the win probability added. Now, Johnny Damon happened to be their best player, and I still don't think the Yankees have a big statistics department. By the way, I don't know if you've ever played, and how many people ever played a baseball simulation game? They won't admit it, but was it Stratomatic? APBA? Anybody ever played Diamond Mine? That's the new one. But the Red Sox hired the guy who wrote the Diamond Mine simulation. He's their director of research. So there's this guy who wrote a simulation computer game who's the director of research for the Red Sox. I heard him talking to Harvard conference. Okay, but if Johnny Damon, what does that 3.77 mean? You look at every time Johnny Damon was up in the regular season last year, he added 3.77 more wins than an average hitter. And if you add this up across, next was A-Rod, Mark Teixeira, who they got, and Derek Jeter was above average, but certain guys were lower. That means their hitting was worth 12 games better than an average hitting team. Let's look at their pitching. And this is all Fangraphs. So you want to analyze your favorite team, look and see what the changes they make in the offseason. Download this, project the change in the spreadsheet. You can predict how good your team will be. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on this, but this is the raw material. The Yankees pitching was 9 games better than average. Rivera, he hardly pitched. He pitched 80 innings, maybe. But he was 4 games better than average, because whenever he comes in, it's lights out. It's basically a close game, and he wins the game. He's in situations which are critical. If you saw the World, I mean, did he give up anything in the World Series or playoffs? I don't think so. I mean, we've got his playoff rating. So Sabathia was 3 games better than average. So you add up the Yankees pitching, it's 9 games better than average. The hitting is 13. They're about 20 games better than an average team. And they probably won a little bit over 100 games, which would go right with it. So you can decompose. Now, the Cubs were really bad in hitting, mainly due to injuries. But the Cubs had really good pitching last year, I told them on NPR. But you look at this, you can see, okay, should I sign a free agent? Well, you'd say, where is he going in this spreadsheet, and who is he replacing? And then you come up with salaries. I don't have time to talk about that. But let me just show you Fangraphs really quick.
I don't see Joe Chamberlain on there. Is he at the very bottom?
Yeah, he was pretty bad. Where are you? Yeah. Chinman was horrible last year. And they took him out of the rotation. I projected the baseball playoffs and did forecasting, and I got every 7 out of 8 series right. The only one I got wrong, Phillies, Dodgers, something like that. But let me just show you Fangraphs really quick, because that was a little, oh gosh, I'm really going to. Can we go a little past 8 with this? Because football won't take that long. Basketball, I mean, I could go for hours on basketball, but I won't. Okay, but Fangraphs.com, like if you go to a team here, you can just go to, I'll pick any team here, the first one that comes up, if it comes up here. They have every year, but okay, like here's the Angels. And then you can go, see, win probability brings up what I said. Here's the basic statistics. There's a whole bunch of stuff here which I don't even know. But I think that win probability tells me how good a player is. Like a guy who's a really good fielder could be worth a game or 2. And almost the best hitter in baseball is 6 games better than average. The best pitcher, Zach Greinke, is like 6 games better. One player cannot be that much better than average. So if you got a fielder who's 2 games better than average, that's a really good fielder. Okay, but I got to get off baseball, not because I want to, but because I want to cover the other stuff.
Does that number change depending on the team you're on?
The win probability?
Yeah.
Well, it could depend on the parks. They try and adjust for parks. See, this is very important. The park factor is only baseball, or this is a big issue. Because if I play, what's the best pitcher's park in baseball? Do you know?
City Field?
Not the Mets, not quite, but San Diego, the Padres, and the best hitter's park is Coors. Okay, so you got a guy who basically, in runs created, they usually do that. If I created 50 runs in Coors and I created 30 runs in San Diego Stadium, the guy who created 30 runs in San Diego is way better. You know, he's a way better hitter. They know all this stuff. The Reds, they even have park factors for minor leagues. Then a whole other can of worms. Predict from a player's minor league record his major league statistics. That's critical. Minor league equivalence, that's called. If you can do that better than the people who do it now, you've got yourself a job. Download every player's minor league statistics, his major league statistics. You come up with a better forecasting method than what's there, you got yourself, you can make a living for life. Until the next person beats you at it. Okay, but basically this stuff is, you see how all the things we learn about, are, and whatever, they really are important. In baseball, it's pretty obvious. But in the other sports, it's just not so obvious. So let us go to the other sport, football. Okay, and there's not that much, I wish I had more to say about football. Let's talk about that Belichick situation. So for the students, particularly in the class, I think this will be helpful. So 4th and 2 on your 28-yard line, 2 minutes to go, the Patriots have the ball, they're up by 6 points. Everybody in the history of football would have punted in this situation. Bill Belichick did not. So how would you model this? I would give this as a job interview question. I'm trying to hire somebody, assuming they know sports. Don't want a culturally biased question. But what I would say, okay, I have to make some assumptions to simplify the problem. My assumption is if the Patriots make the first down, they win the game. It's not quite that simple. Okay, and if they punt the ball, they won't get the ball back. That's a simplification. And it's a first order approximation. I think you can go deeper, but let's stick with that. So then the question becomes, what parameters did Bill Belichick, and I hate Bill Belichick, by the way, I can't stand him. Okay, but I hated to say he was right. But what parameters did Bill Belichick have to estimate to make his decision? There are 3 things. The chance of making the first down. If they punt the ball to the Colts, and Manning was red hot, but should that matter? What's the chance that the Colts would score the touchdown if they punt the ball 40 yards? And what's the chance the Colts would score if they didn't make the first down? Those are really the 3 numbers that matter. And then when you've got that, you can do a simple expected value calculation. I have a website, winston.com, and it's buried there. I'm just running short time. But put that, do me a favor, if you got a pencil and paper, write down your opinion of the 3 numbers. What do you think the chance was the Patriots would make the first down on 4th and 2? Write down a number for that. Call that make. Then if they punted the ball to Peyton Manning and he has 70 yards to go for a touchdown in 2 minutes, write down your opinion of what you think the chance is that the Colts would score a touchdown. Because they're down 6, they need a touchdown. And then if the Patriots don't make the first down, which is what happened, and they did score, write down your chance that you think the Colts would score. Now it turns out if you write down those 3, and Belichick I'm sure did something like this. He has an economics degree from Lehigh. He reads the literature on football. He needs to dress better, but he's a smart guy. Okay. But this is the criteria. Here's a simple equation. If the probability of making the first down plus the probability of the Colts scoring on a long drive divided by short was greater than 1, then basically he should go for it. Now, my numbers when I did this were, I thought make was 0.5. Okay. I thought on a short drive they had a 70% chance of scoring. These are just my opinions. Because you can't look at that. The chance of making the first down, by the way, on 4th and 2 is way more than a half in a typical game. You can look it up, it's about 65%. But I wasn't that optimistic. But you put in 0.5 for this, I put in 0.4 for this, I put in 0.7 for that. So 0.5 plus 0.4 over 0.7 is bigger than 1. Now, I would love to have been able to go on TV and ask every announcer who said he was an idiot what his opinion of those 3 numbers were, or her opinion of those 3 numbers. I will bet you over half the announcers, when they put in their numbers, they would be stuck with saying he had to go for it. Now, I don't say he was right or wrong, but I would say anybody who says he was crazy for going for it, they are wrong. You put in reasonable parameters, and every other math person who looked at this agreed he should go for it. I'm not so strong on it. I just know this is the right equation. It's not that, it's obvious you have more chance of making it, you should go for it more. This is not so obvious, but it comes out of the math. You simply do the expect, it's a good exercise for the students. Look at the probability of winning the game if you go for it. It's the probability of making the first down plus 1 minus make times 1 minus short. And then you compare that, if you punt it, the probability of winning the game is just 1 minus long. You do the algebra and you get this equation. It's a great example. If you're any of you professors who are teaching decision analysis, it's a great little decision tree, and you can do a sensitivity analysis. A great example. And we're going to put it in the new edition for a book. But Belichick was definitely not an idiot. So let's get to some more interesting things in football. How do I evaluate it? Now, baseball players, I think what I told you is sort of close to the gospel on baseball. In football, there is no gospel. I mean, evaluating a football player, okay, now I'm not talking about fantasy sports, I'm sorry. You can evaluate fantasy sports any way you want, but that has nothing to do with the team winning the game. Okay, but I still 30 million people play fantasy sports. You want another project? Figure out how to forecast football players' performances. If you can do that better than other people, start a fantasy website for your career. Where you predict, if you can prove you're better predicting future performance of these guys, you could A, start a career in getting fantasy players to subscribe, as well as team general managers. I mean, this is forecasting. But forecasting, the data's there. I mean, the problem is there's a lot of noise, like I tear my ACL, okay, I get arrested and I'm suspended for a year, and things like that, you know, like the guy in the Steelers trying to kill somebody when he was drunk driving. Okay. So, how do we evaluate running backs? Yards per carry. A dumber statistic probably doesn't exist. I'll give you an example. It's for 3rd and 3, I gained 3 yards. That's a good play, right? It's 1st and 10, I gained 3 yards. It's not so good a play. But in average yards per carry, it's the same. So remember, my whole hypothesis in these sports is you evaluate guys on how they help the team win. So what should you have? A point value for every play. And we have a chart in the book on point values. If you have point values for play, it's a bit complicated. We really solve 10,000 linear programming problems. That's a stochastic game. It's quite, and other people have different views. The Freakonomics guy just wrote a paper on point values for each play. But so I'll give you an example. 1st and 10, you gain 3 yards. That's worth 0 points. It's a neutral play. 3rd and 3, you gain 3 yards. That's worth 7/10 of a point. So what you can do is look at every play, how many points it generates. A turnover, how bad? They always say, I think most games, the Saints won last week because of turnovers. That's in Minnesota. They had Dallas had no chance. That wasn't a turnover. Tony Romo. They were closer in than Jessica Simpson, the offensive line. I mean, basically, no chance there. It wasn't his fault. Okay. But essentially, a turnover as a general rule costs you 4 points. A turnover will cost you 4 points. And so basically, the Vikings gave up 60. How many turnovers did they make Sunday? 4, 5? 5. That's 20 points. They spotted the Saints 20. I don't think Peyton Manning's going to do that. I mean, he does have some bad games. I don't think the Saints' defense is capable of doing that. But I still think, if I get to talk about sports rate, which I may run out of time on, I mean, basically. If you look at the scores of the games, the Saints are probably a little bit better team. But what I sort of advocate, putting a point value on every play, and then you find out the 2 players whose plays created the most points in 2008, and I don't have this for 2009 yet, Manning and Drew Brees. And that makes sense. And what you find out is something, when you look at points per play, you find out something very surprising and important. Passing is much better than running. I mean, maybe it's not surprising to you. But those of us who are older in the room remember 3 yards in a cloud of dust. When you pass 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. Okay, we grew up on Vince Lombardi running the ball all the time. Now they never run the ball. The Colts have the worst running game in the league. It doesn't matter. And I mean, I really think that's true. I mean, because you look at the math here. Okay. Passing creates 0.19 points per play on average. Running creates 0.09 points per play. And so passing on average is twice as good as running, but it has a higher standard deviation. So it's a riskier play. Yet still, I think, if you had an investment that paid off twice as much on average as another investment and was 50% riskier, you would like that investment most of the time. It's like a portfolio problem. I mean, I think, and so what, you should pass more, but don't pass all the time because they'll set a passing defense against you. Okay, but basically, running backs, whenever we look at how many points a player generates, like Adrian Peterson, Mr. Fantasy Football, okay, or I mean, basically, was he the best fantasy football producer this year? Even though he fumbled all the time, he lost the ball. But especially last Sunday. But Adrian Peterson, in 2008, when he had a much better year than this year, he hardly generated any points on his plays. Because, I mean, that was amazing, but I mean, everybody who does this analysis says that. Because running plays are just not as good as passing plays. And it's amazing, the NFL knows this. Quarterbacks get paid the most by a mile, and they should. The quarterback, I mean, Peyton Manning's the best example. I mean, is it the offensive line, is it the receivers, or is it Peyton Manning? I think we're seeing this year it's mostly Peyton Manning. But without an offensive line, he wouldn't be that good. But if you want an unsolved problem, what percentage of the Colts passing game is offensive line receivers for Peyton Manning? I could do the hitting, pitching, and fielding for the Yankees. I see no way to do that for football. There might be, but I don't know how to do it. You need data that I certainly don't have. But basically, if you look at the salary, this really shocked me. You look at the average salary for a good running back and a good wide receiver, the good wide receivers get paid way more. And that's sad because the running backs get killed and they don't have as long a career, and they basically, they're not going to have knees in 10 years, basically, you watch those guys. They get tackled 400 times a season. But the NFL knows the receivers are worth more to the team's success than are the running backs. I mean, and the Colts have been the best example of this. They had Edgerrin James, who we thought was great. They let him go. They bring in Joseph Adai, they win the Super Bowl. Now we got Donald Brown. I think Adai's days are numbered. Okay, I mean, it just doesn't make that much difference who runs for a team. I mean, the offensive line does the blocking. I mean, spending your money, drafting a running back #1 in the NFL draft, top 5, he's a great running back. I mean, you can look at the past history of the running backs. Then another key issue, how do you predict if a guy's going to be good in the NFL? If you can predict, will a college quarterback be a good quarterback? The success rate on first-round quarterback draft picks is 50%. The other 50%, the coach got fired within 2 years because it took the salary cap, took away their flexibility, plus the coach got blamed for the bad offense. If you could come up with a rate that would predict first-round draft picks based on past data, combine data, and college football data, you could predict 70% in knowing what you knew at the time of the draft, success rate for NFL quarterbacks, you're worth $1 billion. Ryan Leach, do we remember who Ryan Leach is? It was between him and Peyton Manning for the first pick. Ryan Leach, did he last 2 months? I don't know. Peyton Manning's going to last till he wants to last. I mean he's going to go down as one of the greatest ever. But I mean, there's all these problems. I mean, the combine data is there somewhere, I don't know where, but a little story on the combine really quick. What's the big statistic in the NFL combine? The 40 time. Did anybody read the article in the New York Times on what was the revolutionary breakthrough? We're trying to understand why this is so simple. Why does not a good 40-yard dash time tell you the guy's going to be a good running back? I can't believe nobody thought of this.
The pads.
What?
Like pads and no pads.
Close, but not quite. Wait. If I'm heavy, I don't have to be as fast a runner. There should be a formula involving your weight and your speed. Fast guys who are light, they get killed. I mean, they're not going to last long. It's basic physics. And so the guy who came out the best in this formula in the history of the last 10 years is Brandon Jacobs. And he's really was a good runner back for the Giants. Plus, they're going to be more durable. So, I mean, now how does the intelligence test score correlate with the quarterbacks? Like Vince Young didn't do well on that test. But I have no idea. I mean, but if you could find that data for the NBA draft is more efficient. But the NFL draft, it's almost bad to get a high pick because you have to pay them a lot of money. And there goes your fixed salary cap, and what do? And so, I mean, there are so many, the data's all there to do this stuff. Can anybody do it? We have a lot of smart minds in the room. I don't know. I don't have enough time in my life to do all this stuff. Okay. Going for a fourth down, thinking back to football 5 years ago, how often did teams go for a fourth down? Almost never. Now you see it all. What did Yale do in the Yale-Harvard game? This is ridiculous, but anybody see this? 4th and 15, Yale-Harvard game, the big game of the year. I'm actually one of my daughter's friends, wide receiver for Yale. I wonder what he thinks of this. 4th and 15, Yale was ahead with 3 minutes to go on their own 30-yard line. They did a fake punt. And they lost the game. And the Yale-Harvard game is like an important game, I mean, it's like Texas A&M or Cowboys, Redskins or something like that. Or I'm reviewed wrong. But I mean, how could you do a fake? People got carried away. I mean, I've seen so many people. I mean, David Romer, his wife Christina, is one of Obama's economic advisors. But he's a macroeconomist at Berkeley. He did a paper saying on 4th down, you should almost always go for it. Now, I don't agree quite with his conclusions, but I know Belichick read that paper. I mean, and then that might have been what got him going on doing it. So basketball, that's what I know the most about, but I think we did a fairly good job. Okay. So I'll give you 4 names here. Tell me who you think is the best player of these. My 4 names are going to be Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Dirk of the Mavericks. So how many people think Kobe Bryant's the best player in the world? I'll be honest. Okay, that's good. All right, I think you're totally wrong. Okay, and it's not just that I can't stand him. Okay, how about LeBron James? Okay, I think you got a good case there. Dwayne, and he's not the best player yet, he sure will be. Or one of the best. Dwayne Wade. Nobody, but Dwayne Wade's as good as LeBron James. Just has a really proven team. Dirk. Dirk's really, and we are biased towards Dirk because we see him play every day. And he's a really good guy. Okay, but if you look at box score, how many people have ever seen the per ratings on ESPN? John Hollinger's, okay. That's the main metric out there. There's two. Remember my main hypothesis, look at the chance of winning the game. How do you affect it? And I'm proud of this we invented, my friend Jeff Sager of USA Today. We invented the new way of evaluating basketball players. It's not perfect, but I'll explain to you. The old way is box score statistics. If you look at the box score, you try and come up with linear weights like in baseball to tell you how good a player is. And here's one right here. It's very simple. You add up the good things, subtract off the bad things. See, these are good things, these are bad things. And you divide by minutes. And metrics like that, what's wrong with that? It misses defense. The box score has almost nothing on defense. Now here's a mathematical theorem for you. In basketball, offense and defense are equally important. I think it's got to be true. Because you take the difference in the scores, I don't have a rigorous proof of that, but if you've got a metric that misses defense a lot, which is half the game, it can't be that good. I mean, it just can't be. There's another thing wrong with this metric. Can you see an inconsistent? This metric makes no sense, and Hollinger's per has the same problem. He won't admit it. Let me explain to you what's wrong with this metric. Let's suppose you shoot 33%. You make 1 out of 3 field goals. So you shoot 3 shots, you get 2 points. There's a +2. You miss 2 shots, right? There's a -2. If you shoot 33%, this formula is neutral. Suppose you shoot 34%. You would gain points in this by shooting. If you took every shot for your team and shot 34%, you would raise your NBA efficiency. Yet your team would never win a game. Because no NBA team shoots below 40% for a season. See, the trick in basketball is getting these weights right. In baseball, it's not that hard. But to get the box score weights right so they would really represent the team ability and the ability of the players. See, when I did the Yankees, I could sum up the ability of the players and I got the ability of the team. Box score metrics will never do that in basketball. They just won't. Okay, so what did Jeff and I come up with? Well, Jeff makes his living rating, and you may have seen his ratings in USA Today, and I don't think I'll have time. It's up to you guys. I mean, if you want to talk about ratings when I'm done with basketball. But again, all this stuff is in the book. But Jeff made his living rating teams, so I said, why don't we rate players? So what data, let's talk about plus minus, which started in hockey. Plus minus means how many points do you outscore the other team by when you're on the court. So let me give you 2 players. Player A is on the Lakers and has a plus minus of +1 point, which means when he's on the court for the Lakers win by 1 point a game. Player B is on the Clippers, the Nets. That's as bad as you get. Okay, player B is on the Nets and he has a plus minus of +1, which means player B is on the Nets and they win by 1 point a game when he plays. Player A is on the Lakers and the Lakers win 1 point a game when he plays. And basically, that's the same plus minus. Who's the better player? The guy in the Nets must be better than LeBron James. If he can take this team that's 4-40 and make them better than average, he must be from another planet. Okay, I mean, he has to be. So you can't look at plus minus. Okay, so what should you look at? You should adjust for who you played with and who you played against. In other words, this is where I think you guys overrate Kobe Bryant. Who are Kobe Bryant's teammates? Ron Artest, crazy but good player. Lamar Odom, vastly underrated. Paul Gasol, really good player. He's got 3. The Lakers are about as good as the Cavaliers this year. I mean, you can't argue that. They got about the same record. Okay, so the sum of the abilities of the players on the Lakers and Cavaliers have to be about the same. Now, LeBron has Shaq, who's like 3 years and 30 pounds past his prime. Okay, I mean, who else does he have? You know who else is a great player on the Cavs? There's somebody who really makes them go as much as LeBron James.
Anderson.
Yeah, right, Varejao. Okay, so Varejao. I can't say his name from Brazil. Now, Anderson Varejao, if you look at the per metric, he's at nothing. Okay, he's a great defensive player. You look at all the lineups that are really good for Cleveland, you'll see he's in and Shaq is out. I mean, he's the guy, he makes them go. And so what we look at is every minute of every game, who's on the court for each team. And we look at how the score changes. By the end of the season, that's 38,000 rows, and that's how we evaluate the players. Okay, so I can show you real quickly our top guys here. The problem is there's a lot of noise in that system. I mean, until when the season has gone on, and then I'll talk about lineups, and then that'll probably be about it. Let me see. Okay, here we go. Oh, accept. So I have to do this again, I guess. Okay, we'll get back to my set. Oh, pop-ups block. That's my problem. Oh, gosh. Okay, well, I can show you some stuff on the Mavericks, but I don't, in the interest of time here. Let me just show you what I call a lineup cap. Now, let me tell you what some of the rankings are for these guys, players here. I mean, like how many points, what we come up with is a points rating. How many points better or worse than average? Okay, I did the Mavericks after their last game. They're playing tonight. This is what we always use with the Mavericks lineup cap. And I'm curious if it worked with the new guy doing it. He was a good guy, but I mean, I'm wondering, they've been doing something which I think is really dumb, and I'll talk about this in a second. Okay, but this is what I call a lineup calculator. I can tell you with any combination of guys on the court how the Mavericks do. And there's one combination which well, first let me tell you what the player ratings are for Nowitzki, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Dwayne Wade. Nowitzki, LeBron James, and Dwayne Wade so far this year in our system are exactly even. They're 22 to 23 points better than average, which means if you put them on the court with 4 average guys against 5 average guys, I think they'd win by 20 points a game, roughly speaking. Kobe Bryant's 13 points better than average. That's really great. But he can't be that good as the other guys because his teammates just aren't as good. I mean, Dirk doesn't have very good teammates this year. The thing that has saved the Mavs this year, they're good in close games, and also Sean Marion's had he's really helped the team. Josh Howard, God knows where he's going to start playing all over. I think they're going to make a deal by the deadline.
Trade him.
Well, they want Kevin Morton, I think, but Kevin Morton's a really bad defender. He's a great offensive player. On per, he's like great. But let me show you something with Mavericks. Okay, I've got some points here. For the whole season, they're 3 points better than an average team. That's okay. But to win the championship, you got to be better than that. But let's look at one thing that has just killed them, and they should never play this. Drew Gooden is not that bad. Maria's not that bad. But when they're together, it's horrible. If you look at every minute those guys are on the court, the Mavericks get beat by 20 points a game. They should never play together. Okay, I mean, you look at every bad lineup they have, it's Maria and Gooden. It can't be coincidence. It's statistically, so I have it highlighted in visual format, every lineup with these guys. If you saw the Philadelphia game last Friday, they lost by like 12, and when Maria and Gooden were on the court, they lost by 13. So that was the game right there. So I mean, they have lost by 139 points, which is really 3 points a game when those guys are in the... They had Maria starting for a while, and I think that would be better because he didn't play with Gooden. Now look at this. How good are they with Gooden playing? And Gooden's not a great player, but when he's in without Maria, things are really pretty good. And when Maria's in without Gooden, things work pretty good. Now, they're 8 points better than average. Now, what does this have to do with OR? What's one thing we learned about, not all of you, but design of experiments, right? Okay, design of experiments. In other words, you have, at Eli Lilly, how do we optimize a production process? We can vary the yield, the temperature, the pressure. And we want to get the yield, temperature, the temperature, pressure, and size of container to affect the yield. And there might be interactions, there might be nonlinearities. In fact, I just showed you a significant interaction. There's a significant negative interaction between J.J. Barea and Drew Gooden on the court. Okay, if I could do a test, it would be p-value 0.001. Okay, so then, I mean, you got, these things happen. There are also significant positive interactions, and we actually track these, if I could show these on our website. But like, to show you how good Dirk is, and then the question is, so how can the Mavericks improve with what they've got? Okay, well, better lineup selection. I mean, but I know they've got the lineup numbers. I mean, we did this for years, and the guy now, he knows how to do lineup numbers. But I don't think they've spotted the fact that Gooden and Barea are, like, here's a game. Well, the Laker, that doesn't go, no. That was the Laker game, I think. I don't think I have quite all the games there. Oh, I thought I did. Okay, but that may, let's see here. How many minutes is that? 2184. No, that's about 48 games. That's about a little bit 12. No, that's about 42 games. That's about it. Yeah, the team, that's not the team that's just not the team they played. It's the right to that. Okay, I see what I do. Okay, but look when Nowitzki's in the game. This is what I mean by being such a good player. They win by 9 points a game. Well, that's pretty good. But when he's out, they lose by 16 per game. That's adjusting for the straight team opponent. That's see, I got a 23-point rating. Roughly the difference between those two numbers is a good estimate of his ability. So the question is, what can we do with Nowitzki out? Okay, well, with Dirk out, they have something good. I mean, I looked through this. If you got Marion on the court, you got Terry on the court, you got Howard on the court, you got Gooden. Look at that. That's not bad. In 86 minutes, and then you got Kittebury as the fifth. They've won by 7 points a game. So, I mean, why wouldn't you set up your lineup so almost all the time Dirk is out, you had that combination on the court? See, you know how many lineups a team plays during the season? 400 to 600. I mean, but the Mavericks understand. See, what do you do in business? You experiment with different yields, temperatures, container sizes, and pressure to figure out what works. You should use the regular season to experiment with your lineups, and then in the playoffs, be ready with what's best. So, I mean, I think they're going to make, well, the West is pretty, they're only 4 games out of 9th place now. So, I mean, it's really pretty tough here. But, I mean, but there's all sorts of insight. Like, what was really, you know what the Mavericks' best lineup was last year? You'd be surprised. And it's been for the last 3 years before this year. Brendan Bass at center, Nowitzki at forward, and then play Terry, Kidd, Howard. Basically, that was the best lineup. And one reason Avery Johnson got fired was that he didn't play that lineup enough in the games that mattered. Because he would go with what he thought Dampier would have trouble against the slow, on videotape that. Okay, but Dampier would have trouble again, like against Golden State. They got hell for playing, trying to change the lineup. But if you looked at what had worked during the season against New Orleans, Dampier had no hope against the Hornets. I mean, whenever it was in against the Hornets, they got free. They need to play, but you can't. What you need to have is a flexible team where you can have a good one, like Denver last year. What killed the Mavs against Denver? Chris Birdman, Nene, and J.R. Smith. Now, why do the Mavericks have a chance against Denver this year? Because J.R. Smith, for some reason, is terrible this year. I have no idea why. I mean, I have no idea. So should I go 5 more minutes, or I mean? Okay. Let me talk about Kevin Durant. Okay. Kevin Durant in our system is the 5th best player in the league this year. He's worth about 18 points better than average. So I was on this website, TrueHoop on ESPN.com, and I've got too big a mouth. I mean, I'm starting to realize that now. I don't mind saying the thing about Brandon Bass, that's fine. Okay, but let's see. Kevin Durant. Okay, now I will stand by in a minute here why I think Kevin Durant. If you're a good player, when you're in the game, you should make your team better, right? When you're out of the game, your team should play worse. Now, Kevin Durant, if you look at per rating, an average NBA player in this per system has a 15 rating. A real superstar would have like a 24 or 25. Kevin Durant, his first 2 years, had a 24 in per. Kevin Durant has the same per rating this year as last year. His team is like 15 games better this year. I mean, they're going to win 45 games. They won 23 last year. So, I mean, I think he's really figured, and it's interesting because I said he wasn't that good a player on this website. He got really mad. He tweeted about it. Okay, and then I think actually, and then the guy on TrueHoop analyzed his videotape and said he doesn't know how to guard the pick and roll, and he shoots whenever he's double and triple teamed. This year he's not doing that. So maybe this is like the uncertainty principle, talking about something changed. I don't know. But let me show you Kevin Durant. I can prove, I got such flack for saying this guy wasn't a good player last year's. But let's just look at last year. When Kevin Durant was on the court, right here, with different players on this team, the team was terrible. They lost by 8 points a game, they lost by 9, they lost by 10. Now go down here, when Kevin Durant's off the court, they did much better. Like with Westbrook, Westbrook's their second best player. He's a guard from UCLA. When he played with Durant, they lost by 6 points a game. When Durant's out, they lost by 1 point. Look at this. When Durant's out, when Kristich is in, they win by 6 points. When Durant's in with Kristich, they lost by 9. How can anybody say he's making this team better? If you look at it overall, I mean, I stand totally by this, that it's statistically significant, and he was not a good player. See, when he was in the game for them, They lost by 8 points a game, adjusting for strength of opponent. When he was out, they lost by 3 points. How can you say this guy was helping the team? By the way, he got hurt for 7 games and they went 5-2. Okay, so I mean, why am I wrong for saying this guy didn't help the team? I mean, I don't understand. I mean, the measure of helping the team is I win games and I outscore the opponent. I mean, it's clear he didn't do that. Now let's look at him this year. I don't have it totally updated. And then I'll talk about ratings, take 3-4 minutes, and then I think that's probably a good point to stop. Okay, so if I look at, I've got Kevin Durant here somewhere. So Oklahoma City, and the Grizzlies are the big story. And they hired a statistician this year, so I think that's part of why they're good, because they know what lineups work. Okay, so let's show you Kevin Durant this year. Where did that go? Let's close the map out. Close that out. Close that out. Okay, so let's find where we, okay, we don't need that. So why didn't that open up to Oklahoma City, January 4th? Okay. The Nets the Nets are like a case of terminal illness. I could find nothing to help them. Okay, it's really difficult. But okay, here we got the Oklahoma City. They're 2 points better than average this year. They were 5 points worse than average last year. Look at this with Durant in. They're 5 points better than average. With Durant out, they're 9 points worse than average. He's a much better player this year. Look, with Durant in, things are mostly pretty good. With Durant out, red means bad. Those numbers, like you can't read. Durant out with Green in, they're 11 points worse than average. When Durant's in with Green, they're 1 point worse, better than average. He's making his teammates better. That's the definition of a really good player. I could show you a average of it. I mean, we're almost out of time. But basically, now what made him a better player this year? I don't know. That's the coach's job. They did a great job teaching him to do the little things in basketball are very important. There are 200 possessions in a basketball game. The Nets are a horrible team, but they're only 10 points worse than an average team. 10 points is 5 baskets on 200 possessions. If you could make 5, if you could make 5 more good plays, like steal the ball, that's 1 point you saved and 1 point you got better than you would have. 5 steals in a game is 10 points. If you could make 5 out of 200 possessions go a different way, you made your team 10 points better. I mean, it doesn't take much. It's a game of little, which is why every team should have a statistician. Because little thing, make an NBA team 1 point better per game to win 3 more games. Let me quickly talk about rating teams. And you can easily do this yourself if you download data. You can even, if you coach your son or daughter's boys club or girls club, you could go in and say, we should win by 5 points tonight. Just don't bet on your kids' games. You'll end up like Pete Rose, right? Okay, so let's see, where do I have this file? Log. NFL. Let's see. Somebody must be chanting for this. Oh, last name. Okay. There's a site, ProFootballReference.com. You can easily set up an Excel web query and download the score of every game for every season. Okay. Now, okay. So what I did here, how many people have used the Excel software? I hope most people. I mean, you can, okay. So you have a model, you have a target cell, changing cells, and constraints. The target cell, the changing cells are the ratings of the teams. How good is every team in the NFL? So these should average to 0. You'll see in a minute your Cowboys are 6 points better than average. I eliminated the Colts' last 2 games because they weren't trying. Okay, and the Saints' last 2 games. But the Saints come out better than the Colts. And then the worst team, I don't know who cares about the worst team. Oh, it got to be the Rams. Yeah, they're horrible. 16 points worse than average. Okay, so how do you set up a solver model? Changing cell are the ratings of the teams. What does a +5 rating mean? Your team is 5 points better than average. What's a -5 rating mean? Your team is 5 points worse than average. Okay, make those average to 0 for simplicity. Okay, now what's the target cell? You want to predict the outcome of the games most accurately. We assume a home edge of 3 points. That's about right. We can actually find that. Well, what you do is you put in any numbers here for the ratings. Like I could say, I'll change these ratings really quick, and they're wrong. But you'll see why. That's saying this is 1 point better than average, etc. Here's the actual scores. Home score, away score, home team. And then I make a prediction, I just use lookup tables. Don't worry about the neutral, that's because the NFL plays a game in London. Okay, there's no home edge out, they should not do that. Okay, but essentially, you look up the home team's ratings, look up the away team's rating, and take the difference, and add 3 points for the home team. That's your prediction for the game. And so what should be, okay, here's a good lesson again in OR. What should be the target cell? Error is actual score minus predicted. Should I minimize the sum of the errors? Why should I minimize the sum of the errors? Positives and negatives will cancel out. I should minimize squared errors. Okay, in other words, if I overpredict the game by 10 points from the home team standpoint, or underpredicted by 10 points, they would cancel out. A plus 10 from the standpoint of the home team and a minus 10. So I square the errors and add them up. Minimize squared errors. And if you do that, you might say, I'll come back to that in a minute. Squared errors is what we use in statistics. Why do we use squared errors in statistics? Because mathematically it's very tractable. I mean, when you run regressions, you're doing squared errors. That doesn't mean you should. I'll get to that in a minute. But I think in this case you should. So so how does this look in Excel Solver? Oops. You want to minimize squared errors, that's right here. Change the ratings, and the average rating is 0. And it takes it like 1 second to get. It's done. So now you'll see the Saints and Colts are the 2 best teams. 5th week of the season, I picked them to be in the Super Bowl. I mean, I wish I'd bet on that. Okay, the Saints are 13 points better than average. The Colts are 10. The Cowboys are 6 points better than average. Actually, Minnesota was 9 points better than average. Okay. Now, what's an alternative to squared errors that people often use, and what's the difference in them? We'll stop. In other words, instead of minimizing squared errors, okay, let's think about finance. You want to minimize the beta, find the beta of the stock. You predict the return on the stock for a given month based on the return on the market. You run a regression. And the slope is the beta of the stock, which is a measure of riskiness. Okay. Well, what's an alternative you could use to squared errors? Absolutely. Right, very good. Okay, so what's the so what are the pros and cons? If I try and minimize, all you have to do in Solver is change it to absolute value instead of squares. So what are the pros and cons of estimation by squared errors versus absolute errors? What do when you estimate by squared errors, what sort of is the tail that wags the dog? Right, we have another piece of chocolate. That's right. Yeah, no, that's right. Okay, well, the outlier, okay, I'll limit you to 2 pieces of chocolate. But that's right, the outliers, because squaring an error of 10, you get 100. If you square an error of 2, you get 4. Okay, so you want the points that are way off the line will move the line the most in this case. So absolute errors doesn't have that property because you're not squaring the errors. So absolute errors, basically, the estimation is more driven by a typical performance. So now the question is, which way should you go? I really like absolute. I'll show you I have the absolute ratings, but my friend has done lots of research. What should be the criteria to decide whether I use absolute or squared errors? What do you think the criteria should be?
Absolute errors.
Whatever predicts the future better. So you should go back at any point in time, get the prediction for that game, every game, and see if you did it by squared errors or absolute, which is more accurate. And squared errors is more accurate. Okay. And so I did absolute errors here, and there's somewhat of a difference. The Saints come out even more, I think, actually, this might be absolute. Let's see. That's squared. So I think the next, here I have absolutes. So if I do absolute, the Colts, here I did offense and defense. Here's how I predicted the score of the game. The Saints had the best offense. They were 13 points better than average. And if you just add these, you can predict the final score of the game. That's how I got 30-28. By the way, that comes out 30-28. It never will, but whatever on that. But just a word about something that I know. How many people think college football should have a playoff? Yeah, I sure do. I mean, I think it's ridiculous the way it is now. But let's talk. Do you know how the BCS picks the teams, the formula? Let's quickly talk about that, and then we'll stop. It's 2/3 votes by pollsters and 1/3 an average of 5 or 6 computers. Now, does anybody know sort of what the computers can use different algorithms, but what is the restriction on the computers? Does anybody know?
They can't use margin of error.
Right, that's right. They can only use who won the game. And that's really dumb. They don't want teams running up the score. But you throw it, and so they have to do something like a logistic regression system or a chess rating system, and I have that in the book. You can have your students do that. But I think that's, in college basketball, you know, they use RPI. That's like really a horrible eyesore. RPI, you can win a game and go down. You can lose a game and go up. Now, if I win a game and go down and I lose a game and go up, it's got to be a stupid system. They should use, and actually my friends' ratings are a major input into the NCAA. But let's suppose you had to do, what problem is when the NCAA says you can only rate teams based on the outcome of the game, what's the big problem they can have? And mathematically, how would you handle it? This is where I'm quite interested. If Harvard goes undefeated and nobody else goes undefeated, a system based on who wins the game will have Harvard number one. No offense to Harvard. But see, a team that never wins a game or never loses a game will have an infinite or minus infinite rating in a system based on who wins the game. So the solution to that is you have a fictitious team and everybody plays them and goes 1-1 against them. Or should they go 2-2? But all these computer systems for the BCS have to have a way of handling that situation. Like there were a lot of undefeated teams this year. And that caused a huge controversy about who should have got in. And would Texas have won if Colt McGuire had got hurt? I don't know. But Texas got shafted the year before. They beat Oklahoma and they didn't go. I think you got it. An 18 playoff, I think, would work. I think you'd have a very high probability of having a team that deserves to win. And it would make the NCAA tournament look like nothing, I think. Particularly in this state. When you have Texas and TCU both going in and undefeated. Wouldn't it have been great if Texas played TCU? I think that's the game. Maybe SMU next year or UT Dallas. We'll see how it goes. Well, I'll take a couple of questions, but I think that's plenty of talking about this. I mean, we talked all the time. But any questions on anything? I probably talked you out here. Yeah, go ahead.
You said that you thought Pujols was the best on the modern day hitter. Who do you think is the best hitter of all time?
You bring up a really good point. Because how do you look at things between errors? There was a great paper in Jackson, I forget the authors, where they tried to compare the difference in the errors, and I think that's really difficult. I mean, I did a little chapter on Ted Williams, what he would hit today, and I used the method other people have used, but somebody knocked that in a review. And Ted Williams hit 406 in 1940. What would he hit today? Well, is the pitching better, or is the pitching worse? See, here's the thing. With the baseball, we get into this argument. I think the baseball players of all time may have been better than today because everybody played baseball. I can't really argue the basketball players of yesteryear were better than the basketball players of today, but I can sure argue I think they were smarter. I mean, they played smarter, and everybody was coaching. I mean, the problem is SportsCenter shows these studs, and that's all anybody cares about. I mean, like LeBron, I love LeBron. Let me just the answer to the question is really hard. And quarterback. Johnny Unitas is the greatest quarterback, I mean, there were less teams then, so you had basically more of the cream of the crop. We have more teams now, but the athletes are better. They have better training outside of the steroids, I suppose. That's a question. In the book, there's a citation for this article in JASA, which is the best attempt I've seen. Like with Tiger Woods, is he better than Arnold Palmer or Ben Hogan? It was before Tiger Woods, well, before a lot of things was Tiger Woods. But that's a really good question. Like they asked me in Wall Street Journal, is Peyton Manning the best quarterback of all time if you project it out? But mathematically, that's something where a professor of statistics, somebody really needs to do so. The data's there, but then you're trying to figure out the errors. But the play I saw about LeBron James that makes me really love him. They were losing by 1 to Oklahoma City with 5 seconds to go last Saturday. I believe pass. I spent too much time on this. They're losing by 1 point with 5 seconds to go. LeBron has the ball. Everybody knows he's going to drive down the middle and try and get fouled. So he gets the ball. He gets to the top of the key. He could drive down the middle and get fouled. But he has a guy, Daniel Gibson, open for a 3, and they don't need a 3. They're down by 1. He throws it to Daniel Gibson with 2 seconds to go. Daniel Gibson hits a 3 at the buzzer. They win the game. He trusts his teammates. In the playoffs, that's what it's about. But Kobe Bryant would have never thrown that pass. I guarantee it. But I mean, LeBron, maybe we'll find out he's worse than Tiger Woods. I have no idea. I hope not. But I mean, his teammates love him. Really, his teammates from high school on just worship the God. I mean, he respects the history of the game. And I think he'll go down. I don't think Michael Jordan was the best player ever. That's not math. I think he had Pippen and Rodman, who were good teammates like Kobe. But I might be wrong. I mean, when I say that in Chicago, they want to throw things at me. Because, I mean, also, plus he pushed off on every play, he admitted that. But stuff like that. But that's comparing the people in different eras. Lots of people have written books trying to do that. This JASA article is really the best, and I have a little bit on it in the book here. That's the best attempt I've seen, and it's really pretty hard to follow. The way I tried to do it real quick, I said, you look at the same pictures every year from 1941 to 1942, you can see the different